Part 4, 7 Ways to Cultivate a Mental Attitude That Will Bring You Peace and Happiness. Chapter 12, 8 Words That Can Transform Your Life. A few years ago, I was asked to answer this question on a radio program. What is the biggest lesson you have ever learned? That was easy. By far the most vital lesson I have ever learned is the importance of what we think. If I knew what you think, I would know what you are. Our thoughts make us what we are. Our mental attitude is the X factor that determines our fate. Emerson said, "A man is what he thinks about all day long. How could he possibly be anything else?" I now know with a conviction beyond all doubt that the biggest problem you and I have to deal with, in fact, almost the only problem we have to deal with, is choosing the right thoughts. If we can do that, we will be on the high road to solving all our problems. The great philosopher who ruled the Roman Empire, Marcus Aurelius, summed it up in 8 words that can determine your destiny. Our life is what our thoughts make it. Yes, if we think happy thoughts, we will be happy. If we think miserable thoughts, we will be miserable. If we think fear thoughts, we will be fearful. If we think sickly thoughts, we will probably be ill. If we think failure, we will certainly fail. If we wallow in self-pity, everyone will want to shun us and avoid us. "You are not," said Norman Vincent Peale, "you are not what you think you are. But what you think, you are." Am I advocating an habitual Pollyanna attitude toward all our problems? No, unfortunately, life isn't so simple as all that. But I am advocating that we assume a positive attitude instead of a negative attitude. In other words, we need to be concerned about our problems, but not worried. What is the difference between concern and worry? Let me illustrate. Every time I cross the traffic-jammed streets of New York, I am concerned about what I am doing but not worried. Concern means realizing what the problems are and calmly taking steps to meet them. Worrying means going around in maddening, futile circles. A man can be concerned about his serious problems and still walk with his chin up and a carnation in his buttonhole. I have seen Lowell Thomas do just that. I once had the privilege of being associated with Lowell Thomas in presenting his famous films on the Allenby Lawrence campaigns in World War I. He and his assistants had photographed the war on half a dozen fronts. And, best of all, had brought back a pictorial record of T.E. Lawrence and his colorful Arabian army, and a film record of Allenby's conquest of the Holy Land. His illustrated talks entitled "With Allenby in Palestine and Lawrence in Arabia" were a sensation in London and around the world. The London opera season was postponed for 6 weeks so that he could continue telling his tale of high adventure and showing his pictures at Covent Garden Royal Opera House. After his sensational success in London came a triumphant tour of many countries. Then he spent 2 years preparing a film record of life in India and Afghanistan. After a lot of incredibly bad luck, the impossible happened. He found himself broke in London. I was with him at the time. I remember we had to eat cheap meals at cheap restaurants. We couldn't have eaten even there if we had not borrowed money from a Scotsman, James McBay, the renowned artist. Here is the point of the story. Even when Lowell Thomas was facing huge debts and severe disappointments, he was concerned, but not worried. He knew that if he let his reverses get him down, he would be worthless to everyone, including his creditors. So each morning before he started out, he bought a flower, put it in his buttonhole, and went swinging down Oxford Street with his head high and his step spirited. He thought positive, courageous thoughts and refused to let defeat him. To him, being licked was all part of the game, the useful training you had to expect if you wanted to get to the top. Our mental attitude has an almost unbelievable effect even on our physical powers. The famous British psychiatrist, J.A. Hadfield, gives a striking illustration of that fact in his splendid book, The Psychology of Power. "I asked 3 men," he writes, "to submit themselves to test the effect of mental suggestion on their strength, which was measured by gripping a dynamometer. He told them to grip the dynamometer with all their might. He had them do this under 3 different sets of conditions. When he tested them under normal waking conditions, their average grip was 101 pounds. When he tested them after he had hypnotized them and told them that they were very weak, they could grip only 29 pounds, less than a third of their normal strength. One of these men was a prize fighter. And when he was told under hypnosis that he was weak, he remarked that his arm felt tiny, just like a baby's. When Captain Hadfield then tested these men a third time, telling them under hypnosis that they were very strong, they were able to grip an average of 142 pounds. When their minds were filled with positive thoughts of strength, they increased their actual physical powers almost 500%. Such is the incredible power of our mental attitude. To illustrate the magic power of thought, let me tell you one of the most astounding stories in the annals of America. I could write a book about it. But let's be brief. On a frosty October night, shortly after the close of the Civil War, a homeless, destitute woman, who was little more than a wanderer on the face of the earth, knocked at the door of Mother Webster, the wife of a retired sea captain, living in Amesbury, Massachusetts. Opening the door, Mother Webster saw a frail little creature, scarcely more than 100 pounds of frightened skin and bones. The stranger, a Mrs. Glover, explained she was seeking a home where she could think and work out a great problem that absorbed her day and night. "Why not stay here?" Mrs. Webster replied. "I'm all alone in this big house." Mrs. Glover might have remained indefinitely with Mother Webster, if the latter's son-in-law, Bill Ellis, hadn't come up from New York for a vacation. When he discovered Mrs. Glover's presence, he shouted, "I'll have no vagabonds in this house." And he shoved this homeless woman out of the door. A driving rain was falling. She stood shivering in the rain for a few minutes, and then started down the road, looking for shelter. Here is the astonishing part of the story. That vagabond whom Bill Ellis put out of the house was destined to have as much influence on the thinking of the world as any other woman who ever walked this earth. She is now known to millions of devoted followers as Mary Baker Eddy, the founder of Christian Science. Yet, until this time, she had known little in life except sickness, sorrow, and tragedy. Her first husband had died shortly after their marriage. Her second husband had deserted her and eloped with a married woman. He later died in a poor house. She had only one child, a son. And she was forced, because of poverty, illness, and jealousy, to give him up when he was 4 years old. She lost all track of him and never saw him again for 31 years. Because of her own ill health, Mrs. Eddy had been interested for years in what she called the science of mind healing. But the dramatic turning point in her life occurred in Lynn, Massachusetts. Walking downtown one cold day, she slipped and fell on the icy pavement and was knocked unconscious. Her spine was so injured that she was convulsed with spasms. Even the doctor expected her to die. If by some miracle she lived, he declared that she would never walk again. Lying on what was supposed to be her deathbed, Mary Baker Eddy opened her Bible, and was led, she declared, by divine guidance to read these words from St. Matthew. And, behold, they brought to him a man sick of the palsy, lying on a bed. And Jesus said unto the sick of the palsy, Son, be of good cheer, thy sins be forgiven thee. Arise, take up thy bed, and go unto thine house. And he arose, and departed to his house.